to Changing Healthcare, an exploration of people and brands that disrupt healthcare for the better. I'm sitting here today with Stacie Deyglio. She's a naturopathic physician in New York City. She is also a Reiki master, a science educator, and she specializes in family medicine, chronic diseases, diet and lifestyle interventions. But we're talking to her today because she's been really, really successful with telemedicine, just helping adapting to the needs of her client base without expecting them to sort of, conform to her process. Instead, she takes a unique approach of adapting to what really works best for them on an individual level. So I'm really excited to get into this. Thank you for joining us today, Stacie.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You bet. You bet. So I would love, there's so much conversation out there happening right now about telemedicine and best practices. What is the biggest thing that a lot of practitioners are just getting wrong?
I think that practitioners are expecting different results through telemedicine that they're not seeing in real time that is live. There's a lot of hesitation with telemedicine and a difficulty that, people have not being able to communicate face to face, even though we really are talking, but we're talking through a computer. So I think that most practitioners find that there's a challenge that's a caveat that's maybe a mental caveat that they have to get over, number one. And number two, I think that there's like a hesitation to expand and adapt to meet the client's need. Not everybody can assimilate well into telemedicine, especially at first. And it takes a lot of patience, a lot of practice, and a lot of time and nurturing care also to communicate well with them and to kind of find the niche or even the path that works well on an individual basis, like client per client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So can you tell us a little bit about what your process is like? How did you really approach this, when you were first getting started? And I guess just to back up for a second, did you practice telemedicine before the pandemic started, or
I practice it minimally, or not as much as I've had to do as a result of the pandemic. So it really started for me quite heavily, like February and March of 2020, and I had to rapidly conform, in order for me to survive and doing what I'm doing. So I had a client basis, and I needed to meet and reach these people, and I needed to answer their questions. And, there was a large state of confusion at the time. So I sat and I developed a whole way of communicating with everyone on a individual basis, if that was necessary, or through a blast form, through emails or Google Forms, and to make them aware of, well, this is how we're proceeding and this is how we're going next, because we have to adhere to what the guidelines are, and we all have to stay safe. And that adaptation that happened so rapidly at the start of the pandemic really was what kind of paved the way for what I'm doing now.
mm-hmm. And so can you tell us a little bit more about the process? It sounds like there's like an intake form that you
Yeah,
offer to
yeah.
people, and then what happens after that?
Sure. So I guess everyone who comes in to see me has to complete an intake form. It's really rather long. It's lengthy. It's about anywhere between 14, 15, sometimes even 20 pages, depending upon what their chief complaint is and what they want me to address. With clients who are established, I didn't need them to do that because they had already done it prior. So we just kind of moved forward with meeting on a consistent basis. We had weekly check-ins. We were up at different hours of the day making appointments. If it worked better for them to meet at like 5 a.m., then I was up at 5 a.m. meeting them and having a private conversation. So there's a large degree of flexibility with patients who are already established, clients who are already established. And then moving forward with any type of new client, then they had to complete the full intake. And then we went through the same process that I would if they were sitting physically face to face with me, where we had a very long conversation for the first consult, and then, like up to upwards of an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then 45 minutes for the next consult, and, so on and so forth, up until the point where they were established. And we could just do something that was very simple, like a weekly check-in, or a Google form, or some type of a text message, or a way of communicating that they filled out a questionnaire that I had made, and I just wanted to see what was going on, and they clicked the answers, and, in a multiple choice kind of fashion, and then I got the information, so that I was continually able to communicate with them, but I adapted to a more virtual process of communicating.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so that sort of brings up another interesting point where, we're all experiencing a certain amount of Zoom fatigue right now, right? So you've got that
Mhm.
initial consultation, it sounds like there are a number of scheduled follow-ups. There's just so much noise in everyone's schedule now in terms of, video chats on Zoom and things like that. So how do you really maintain a strong personal human connection with somebody? How do you rise above the noise and really, maintain that virtually?
Um, that's a great question. I've always been able to establish rapport with a client that supersedes all the anxiety that they're dealing with, or that, like the 800-pound gorilla in the room. So you really have to be very honest and very present with them. So building rapport is one of the foundations to making this a successful endeavor, and using a ton of humor to put everyone at ease. We're all going through the same process. We're all going through it individually, distinctly, and differently. And everyone has their own struggles that they're experiencing. And we need to be present with those, as well as to focus on the solutions and how to, like you said, rise above this and to make it better, and more adaptable, and so that we can continue to move on and to move into healing, which is where we need to be.
And it's so easy to see how personable you are, just like you speak to people really naturally. And um, I'm sure that, in a sense, the pandemic has almost made NDs like you even more accessible to people, because we're all going through the same experience, right? Like we've got this one massive common denominator right now, and that is, we're experiencing a pandemic that hasn't happened in 100 years, right? This is
Yeah.
significantly life changing for all of us, and so in a lot of ways, it probably sort of helps you connect with patients on that level, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think it actually allowed me to draw even closer to them and to be more conscious and cognizant of what their needs were, especially with communicating on this in this, form. So, some elderly patients don't adapt very well to telemedicine. So we had to navigate that and circumvent it. And you really have to be flexible and open-minded. You can't assume or demand that the client is going to adapt to the method that you have established, that this is the only way that you're going to do it moving forward. You really have to meet their need and also anticipate what their needs will be. So, like, for example, if I have a client who I'm going to already have in the back of my mind, well, this person may not answer, my phone calls, or may not meet me at the Zoom, meetings, every single one that I set up. How am I going to approach this, and how am I going to expand this relationship so that I can make it successful for them? I'm really here to serve their needs, and they're coming to me for that reason. So it's kind of like the conversation that you establish and the rapport that you have with them at the beginning, at the onset of the relationship, is really the most powerful, because it allows you to really interpret a lot about what that patient and client needs, and then to really be open-minded and establish flexibility. So
Mhm.
say if this person wants a weekly check-in, if text message works best for them, if an email works best, if a Google form works best, if they don't want to see me and waste the time on a Zoom, or if they're not going to entertain a Zoom where it's going to be private so that we can have a one-on-one conversation. Well, then we have to do something different. We have to have a phone call,
Hmm.
or we have to, and you always have to remember that you have to protect yourself and at the same time meet and anticipate their needs.
Now, you bring up such an important point here where, different people have different communication preferences, but it sounds like consistency is really sort of the cornerstone of this, right? You need to really establish a precedent and make sure that you're meeting often enough to make sure that they are on track and hitting their health goals. How do you manage that with so many different, like, if you're texting and you're calling and you're doing Zoom, like, how do you manage all that?
I manage it through a calendar system. So I have everything that's set up and then pre-set up in advance. And then I also have like an email blast system and a whole system of communicating where clients who only will use a Google form. It works best for them. That's what they love. That's what they'll answer to. And I kind of categorize everybody into like, okay, well, what form of communication works best, or how can we best serve their need? And then I kind of like give everyone like a little, a box that they fit in or a category that they fit in, and then that's how I proceed forward. So I definitely check in with everyone at least twice a month, and that's really important to do, because then you can see how you're going to move forward and what needs to be repurchased or in terms of supplements, and what needs to be referred if they're having an issue that needs to go somewhere else, um, and just checking in on how they're doing, really.
Hmm. Well, and you just brought up supplements, which is, another important piece of this, just making sure that patients are getting the nutrients that they need. Um,
Mhm.
how are you sort of managing patient compliance? Are you relying exclusively on virtual dispensaries right now?
Um, I am at the present moment. I had to have a big shift from having what I had in house in my own dispensary, and then shifting to the virtual dispensaries, because those are what works best right now. And I find that there's been a little dip in patient compliance because of it. But at the same time, it's been like significant, maybe only 10 or 15%. And I think it's as a result of, the adaptation process, and that people now are receiving things in the mail and missing that whole social component of coming in, and that warmth and that, communication that they would receive if they came in and saw me physically
Mhm.
and received it in hand and paid at that moment. So I perceive that to be where the dip has come from. So I'm looking for solutions about how to kind of like circumvent that. And even if it means that I have to transform to some extent into my own virtual dispensary and purchase the supplements and then ship it out through my own home. I'm exploring options. I don't necessarily know if that will be worth my while right now,
Mhm.
but I would like for all of my patients to be as compliant as they should be, because these recommendations that they are being made are for their best interest and for their best health.
Yeah, and it has a big impact on results, right? Um,
Absolutely.
and it's a little bit harder to sort of stay on top of all that when there's another third party app involved, and there's like something missing there, right?
Yeah, it's like having a teenager and then having to remind them to put deodorant on and brush their teeth and clean up their room, and because
Deodorant is important.
that nag issue has been transformed into getting your nutrients that you need. So
Very true. So I'm also sort of curious about practitioners that need to do physical examinations. So it sounds like there are only about 15 states in the country that really that license naturopaths to do physical exams. Uh, what are you hearing about, from other, physicians that you network with and talk to about virtual care? How are they managing that piece?
They are still seeing patients in a face-to-face format when they have a new patient. They are slowing down quite a lot, and that's as a result of all of the compliance issues that have been put in place and that we must adhere to. So I don't necessarily know if they're seeing as many new patients, because a new patient or even a follow-up patient who you would need to do a physical exam on, you know, is kind of able to fit into those like more limiting brackets, where you have to wear a mask, you have to call 15 minutes before, you have to come alone,
Hmm.
you have to come only during certain time frames that are available, or if it's a child or an elderly person, you would come with only one other person, like a caregiver. And sanitize your hands. All of the compliance issues kind of like slow everything down. I have only heard that they're able to do it. It's just at a slower pace. So.
Right, right. Okay. Um, so it sounds like you've really come a long way with virtual care. What is the aspect of it that's the most challenging for you at this point?
I don't think there's enough hours in the day for me. Definitely to do everything that I need to do and to meet all the needs of the clients who come to see me. I maybe if I had a clone, but that's a little impossible. But I think that we're all navigating and adapting to it. I only actually see this as kind of branching, being more profoundly important as we move forward in the future. And it's really given me the opportunity to meet my clients on a much more kind of intimate basis, because they feel and they feel the connection, and then they have that type of time that they've carved out for themselves, really, to sit and to talk about the issues that they're struggling with and that they want resolved to.
Right. Uh, so are you accepting patients from outside the greater New York City area? What's the
Oh,
story there?
oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, I see many clients who are not in this state, not and are not in the country. So yeah, absolutely. And yeah, everyone who comes to me is through word of mouth.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important for sure. So what's give us an example. What's the patient that's furthest away from you? Where do they live?
Oh, I have a few clients in Canada, and I have a client in the UK.
Wow,
Yeah, so far that's how far we've gotten.
that's so cool. So, all right. So if somebody did want to learn a little bit more about you, how would someone go about that?
Well, I'm on the internet, and they can contact me through LinkedIn, and I'm definitely on Facebook, um, and um, and I'm sure through this information as well, if it's available here. Yeah.
Yep, and we'll be sure to include some links in the notes as well, so that people can track you down and little learn more about the great things that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You
Thank you so
bet.
much. I appreciate it.
Stacie, I can't thank you enough for joining us today. This is really valuable information, and I know that a lot of practitioners are really struggling with this. So
Uh,
I'm sure it'll help them a lot.
Absolutely. I would only encourage them to be as flexible and as open-minded as possible. It will be to your own success.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Changing Healthcare is a production of Creative Side Marketing. Are you struggling to get trackable ROI from your website content? Trying to boost the number of quality leads for your sales team and provide an amazing customer experience? At Creative Side Marketing, we work with healthcare brands who believe in what's possible and help them disrupt for the better. Let us help you grow using inbound marketing and customer experience solutions. Visit us at creativesidemarketing.com to learn more.